The rain started at midnight. Not a gentle drizzle, but a relentless downpour that beat against the windows like fingers trying to get in. Thunder rolled over Pine Grove Community Hospital, and lightning flashed across the surrounding woods, casting brief, stark shadows on the walls. The hospital, small and underfunded, stood like a forgotten tombstone on the edge of Briar Hill, a rural town that slept early and kept its secrets buried deep. Lila Monroe, a night nurse in her 5th year, adjusted the stiff collar of her uniform and settled in for her 3rd consecutive solo graveyard shift. The hallways were quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of old pipes. It was a shift she had grown used to, checking on patients, reviewing charts, and refilling meds, but tonight felt different. The storm, yes, but something else. The air felt too still. The silence too thick. There were only 2 patients on the 3rd floor tonight, Mr. Hawkins in room 306, recovering from pneumonia, and Mrs. Gutierrez in 311, recovering from hip surgery. Both were stable, both sleeping. Lila made her first rounds at 1 a.m., jotting notes, adjusting IVs, and lowering a window shade that flapped in the wind. As she passed room 309, she paused. It was empty. Not just unoccupied, vacant in a way that still held the echo of someone who had recently been there. The bed was freshly made, the scent of antiseptic still lingering, and the blinds drawn just enough to let in slivers of light from the storm. James Carter, the last occupant, had passed away there less than a week ago. Lila remembered it too well. She had been with him when he died. He had held her hand in his frail, bony grip, his lips trying to form words, his lungs rattling. She had leaned in, trying to hear. "It's okay, Mr. Carter," she'd whispered. "You can let go." But he hadn't. His eyes had pleaded. He had wanted to say something. He never got the chance. By 2:45 a.m., the rain had intensified, becoming a constant drone. Lila sat at the nurse's station, sipping lukewarm coffee and checking supply orders on the terminal. That's when the call button lit up room 309. She froze. The red indicator blinked slowly. The soft ping echoed down the hall. Room 309 was empty. It had been cleaned, sealed, and taken off rotation until the following week. Her rational mind stepped in first. Faulty wiring. Storm interference. Old equipment glitching out. She reset the call panel. The light went off. Then, 10 seconds later, it came back on. Room 309, call. Lila stood slowly. She grabbed her flashlight and headed toward the hallway, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. The further she got from the nurse's station, the darker the hall seemed to become, like the emergency lights were dimming just for her. Room 309 stood waiting. She pushed the door open. The room was cold. Not mildly uncomfortable, freezing. Her breath fogged in the beam of the flashlight. She panned across the room, the bed was untouched. The chair in the corner had been turned slightly, facing the window now. The curtain had been drawn wider. She didn't remember it like that. She took a few steps in beep. Her heart stuttered. It was the sound of a heart monitor. She turned. The monitor was off. The cables were coiled neatly. No power running to it. Beep. And then a whisper. "Nurse." She turned quickly. No one there. Then again, right by her ear. "You forgot to say goodbye." Lila bolted. She didn't stop running until she was back at the nurse's station. Her hands were shaking. The coffee had gone cold. She stared at the call panel. The light for room 309 was off. She tried to call the security desk, but the line was dead. She considered leaving, just walking out into the storm and not looking back. But her training kept her rooted. She wasn't hurt. Nothing had happened. Not really. Just strange noises. Malfunctioning equipment. She made another round, deliberately skipping room 309. Mr. Hawkins was asleep, snoring softly. Mrs. Gutierrez stirred but settled when Lila whispered that everything was okay. Back at the nurse's station, she logged into the patient archive. She pulled up Carter's chart. Time of death, 3:12 a.m., June 8, listed nurse on duty, L. Monroe. She scrolled through the notes she had entered herself: patient unresponsive, shallow breaths, attempted communication. No final words. DNR observed. Then she noticed something new. A log entry timestamp just 20 minutes ago. June 15, 2:47 a.m. room 309, nurse called. Patient requested final words. She hadn't entered that. She looked at the system log. No other users logged in. No override code used. She tried to delete the note. Access denied. She printed it out instead and folded the paper into her pocket. Around 3:20 a.m., she went down to the main floor to check the visitor log. Maybe someone had come in. A relative? Someone unauthorized? The desk was empty. Security had already left for the night. She checked the digital sign-in. Nothing since 8 p.m. But when she pulled up the stairwell camera, the footage showed the door to the third floor opening at 2:44 a.m. No one entered. Just the door creaking open on its own. Back on the third floor, Lila sat in the break room, sipping tea she didn't remember making. The building was silent now. Even the storm had quieted, reduced to a distant tapping. She heard the elevator ping. But she hadn't called it. She stood slowly and looked down the hallway. The elevator doors opened. A figure stood inside. Dressed in a hospital gown. Pale. Face obscured by shadow. She blinked. It was gone. Nothing inside. Just the reflection of herself in the metal walls. She backed away. At 6:43 a.m., the day shift nurse found Lila in the supply closet. Her scrubs were soaked. Her shoes were muddy. Her eyes wide, unblinking. She hadn't stepped outside all night. She just kept whispering, over and over. He said, I forgot. I forgot to say goodbye. The rain had been falling since dusk, a thick, relentless downpour that turned parking lots into shallow lakes and drowned out even the distant hum of the highway. At 1:12 a.m., the suburban Crestwood Galleria sat like a dead monolith under the flickering fluorescent glow of dying streetlights. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. Mark Delaney, 34, former Marine and now the sole night security guard, sat in the main surveillance room nursing a lukewarm cup of gas station coffee. He had grown used to the silence over the years. He preferred it. No teens sneaking in. No alarms. Just cameras and rain. He leaned back, watching the bank of monitors that showed grainy black and white footage from various parts of the mall. Everything looked still. The storm had triggered a few flickers earlier, but the backup generator was working fine. The lights stayed on. The cameras stayed live. At 1:17 a.m., he saw something strange. A figure. Standing perfectly still in the middle of the food court. Tall. Thin. Dressed in dark clothing that looked soaked through. Mark leaned forward. No one should be here. He tapped a few buttons and zoomed in. The image distorted as it enlarged, but the figure remained still. Facing away from the camera. No visible face. No movement. Just standing. He grabbed his flashlight, strapped on his radio, and walked out into the corridor. His boots echoed across the polished tile. Every store was shuttered. Every light flickered faintly overhead. The only sound was the storm outside and his own breath. He made it to the food court empty. No figure. No sign of movement. Only the soft hum of soda machines and a distant flickering light from the pretzel stand. Then he heard it. Tap. Tap. Behind him he spun. There was nothing but the large glass wall facing the parking lot. Rain streaked down in endless rivulets. But something had tapped clearly. He approached the glass, flashlight cutting through the murky outside. Nothing there. Just an empty lot, except for his car and a few puddles reflecting the mall's red exit signs. Back in the surveillance room, Mark reviewed the footage. He rewound to the moment he left. The figure had vanished as soon as he exited the frame. Fast forward. The figure reappeared. Closer to the camera this time. It was now facing the lens. No facial features visible. No reflection in the floor. Just a soaked outline. Watching. Then the feed began to glitch. Camera 07 offline. Camera 12 static. The lights above flickered. Then died darkness. The only sound was the storm. And then... tap. Tap. This time, it came from the security room door. Mark didn't open it. The door never unlocked again. When the day crew arrived at 7:04 a.m., they found the security room empty. Coffee cold. Chair pushed back like someone had stood up quickly. His keys and radio were still on the desk. The tape for camera 09, covering the food court, was gone. Mark never returned. He was never seen again. Only the rain remained. And the occasional 2 taps. The storm had come in fast, drenching the streets and lashing at the windows of the lonely hilltop building that housed WZRQ 107.5 FM. The rain fell like bullets against the reinforced glass, and thunder rolled through the valley below, bouncing off the distant pines. The station had been around since the 1960s, long before digital radio, before automation, and before Carla Hart ever thought she'd be a late-night voice to the sleepless and strange. It was 12:03 a.m. Carla sipped her black coffee, mic live, and spoke in her signature warm, smoky voice. "You're listening to Midnight Airwaves. I'm Carla, keeping you company through the static and the storm. Call in, tell me what keeps you up. Or just listen. You're not alone." A guitar solo from an old blues track faded in. The line blinked. One caller on hold. She tapped the console. "You're on the air. Who am I talking to tonight?" The line hissed for a moment. Then a voice, low and whispering, "You sound lonely." Carla chuckled, masking the slight chill that climbed her spine. "Aren't we all?" Silence stretched. "I'm watching the lights," the voice continued. "Excuse me?" "One just went out." Carla swiveled in her chair, peering through the studio's window. The rain blurred the view, but the hill's winding access road was still visible. 6 streetlights ran up the path, illuminating the approach in sickly orange. One of them, the third, flickered, then died. Her blood chilled. She turned back to the mic. "Very funny. Where are you calling from?" "Static." Then, closer. She ended the call. The next track began. Her hand trembled as she queued up another. She activated the auto DJ loop to buy herself a few minutes. The storm outside intensified, wind howling through the vents. The building groaned. The phone rang again. She didn't want to answer. She did anyway. "WZRQ, you're on." Same voice. More distorted. Like it was crawling through static and wire. "Don't bother locking the door," the voice rasped. "You already did that, yesterday." She stood up so fast her chair rolled into the wall. She ran to the main entrance, heart thudding. The heavy studio door was bolted shut. She had locked it yesterday. Which meant... She looked out the front windows. 4 streetlights remained. Then 3. Then 2. The darkness crept closer with each flicker. She ran back to the booth, locked herself inside, and shut off the mic. Panic surged. She dialed 911. No signal. The landline buzzed. Not a ring. A buzz. She picked it up. "You let the silence in," the voice said. It never left. She screamed and hung up. Outside, one light remained. It flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows. And beneath it stood a figure. Tall. Still. Drenched. No face. Just void. The final bulb popped, plunging the hilltop into darkness. All that remained was the hiss of the radio static and her own ragged breathing. When the morning crew arrived, the studio was empty. The mic was live. A slow, rhythmic breath came through the speakers. Just breath. Carla was never found. And the line? Still active. Sometimes, if you call just past midnight, a voice will whisper. I'm watching the lights. One just went out. The rain hadn't stopped in hours. It came down in thick sheets, pounding the pavement and soaking everything in an endless rhythm that felt less like weather and more like punishment. It was just after 3 a.m. at the Horizon Quick Stop, a 24-hour gas station tucked off a lonely stretch of interstate, halfway between nothing and nowhere. Nothing ever really happened there. Not until that night. Jay Matthews, 28, ex-roadie, now night shift clerk, had just refilled the coffee pot when he heard the dull bell ding signaling someone stepping under the canopy outside. He turned, expecting to see a car at one of the pumps, but the lot was empty. Almost. There, standing motionless beneath the yellow fluorescent lights of the awning, was a man. He wore a long black coat, tailored and pristine despite the weather, and held a perfectly white umbrella over his head. Not a drop stained it. His shoes gleamed. His face was hidden by the umbrella's curve. Jay waited. The man didn't move. Didn't look up. Didn't speak. Jay watched for nearly 5 minutes before stepping around the counter and pushing through the door. The cold rain stung his face immediately. He raised his hood and approached. Hey, Jay said, trying not to sound uneasy. You okay out here? The man didn't respond. Jay shifted his weight. You waiting for a ride or something? Nothing. Jay moved closer, under the awning now, just feet away. The man didn't even flinch. Look, Jay tried again. If you need to come in, warm up or whatever, that's fine. Just. The man turned. Only slightly. Just enough for Jay to realize he still couldn't see his face. The umbrella's angle kept it in shadow. Jay felt a deep unease crawl up his spine. He backed away, returning inside without another word. The glass door hissed shut behind him. Rain beaded down its surface. Jay checked the monitors. All 6 exterior cameras showed nothing. No figure. No umbrella. No coat. The feed was clear, bright even, as if the rain itself didn't touch the lens. He blinked. Rubbed his eyes. Checked again. Still nothing. He looked out the window. The man was still there. But not on the cameras. Jay turned back to the counter. Wet footprints. They hadn't been there before. They trailed in from the door. Past the register. Behind the counter. Right behind where Jay had just been standing. He froze. His reflection stared back at him from the cooler doors across the aisle. And behind his reflection, the white umbrella open inside dripping. Jay spun around. No one. Just the humming of the fluorescence and the smell of burned coffee. The footprints were gone. He checked the cameras again. Playback. Rewind. Still nothing. He tried to laugh it off. Maybe a prank. Maybe stress. Sleep deprivation. He called the manager, voice shaking. Left a voicemail he barely remembered. At 5:15 a.m., the rain finally stopped. Sunrise pushed its first pale fingers over the distant hills. Jay went outside. The pavement steamed. There were no footprints. No trace of anyone having stood there for hours. Only a single object leaned against pump 4. A white dry umbrella still open pristine. He didn't touch it. He left the job the next day. No one believed him. But the new overnight guy? He lasted 3 nights. He quit after finding wet footprints circling the register at 3:03 a.m. No rain that night. Just silence. And the faint smell of ozone. They say if you drive by the Horizon Quick Stop after midnight, you might see a figure standing under the awning. You won't see him on camera. And if you do stop to ask if he needs help, check the reflection. That's where the umbrella always shows up first.